The UK says it has paused free trade talks with Israel and announced further sanctions against West Bank settlers to protest against Israel's actions in Gaza.
The United Kingdom has officially suspended trade talks with Israel in response to the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. This marks a significant shift in UK foreign policy and sends a powerful message to the international community. The decision came after growing pressure from both domestic political figures and international human rights organizations, who have condemned Israel's continued blockade of Gaza and the worsening conditions for civilians. Foreign Secretary David Lammy stated that the UK could not continue negotiations while Israel's military actions in Gaza remain unchecked and humanitarian access is being denied.
And European countries have ramped up pressure on Israel to abandon its expanded military offensive and to allow more aid into war-torn Gaza. A day after the UK, France and Canada threatened Israel with targeted sanctions, Israel's biggest trading partner, the European Union, has announced that the bloc would review its trade agreement with Israel, calling the situation in Gaza as untenable. EU Foreign Affairs Chief Kaja Kallas said that the move was backed by a majority of the foreign ministers of the 27 member states. A spokesperson for the Israeli Foreign Ministry rejected the EU's decision and accused it of misunderstanding the complex reality that Israel is facing. It called on the EU to exert pressure on Hamas instead. Britain too ramped up pressure on Israel as Foreign Secretary David Lammy announced the suspension of negotiations for a free trade agreement with Israel. In an impassioned speech in the British Parliament, Lammy slammed Israel's Gaza offensive as morally unjustifiable and wholly disproportionate. David Lammy also condemned statements from the Israeli cabinet ministers about cleansing Gaza and called the remarks extremist, dangerous and monstrous.
Netanyahu's government is planning to drive Gazans from their homes into a corner of the strip to the south and permit them a fraction of the aid that they need. Yesterday, Minister Smodrik even spoke of Israeli forces cleansing Gaza, destroying what's left of residents, Palestinians, being relocated, he said, to third countries. We must call this what it is. It is extremism. It is dangerous. It is repellent. It is monstrous, and I condemn it in the strongest possible terms.
The UK Foreign Secretary also announced sanctions against 3 individuals and 4 organizations involved in expanding settlements in the occupied West Bank.
Today, we are therefore imposing sanctions on a further 3 individuals and 4 entities involved in the settler movement. I have seen for myself the consequences of settler violence, the fear of its victim, the impunity of its perpetrators. Today, we are demonstrating again that we will continue to act against those who are carrying out heinous abuses of human rights.
Meanwhile, Gaza continues to be on the brink of starvation. A day after Israel allowed entry of basic aid into Gaza, it claimed that it had permitted 93 UN aid trucks into the enclave by Tuesday. But according to the UN, only 5 of the 8 trucks had reached Gaza, and aid workers had not been given permission to distribute even that token shipment. UN aid chief Tom Fletcher has warned that 14,000 babies could die in Gaza in the next 48 hours if aid did not reach them in time. During the first phase of the ceasefire that ended in March, some 600 aid trucks entered Gaza each day. According to the United Nations, Gaza needs at least 500 trucks of aid and commercial goods every single day.
He emphasized that the UK's commitment to international law and human rights must guide its foreign policy, even with long-standing allies. This move comes at a time when global tensions are rising over Israel's conduct in Gaza. More than 35,000 Palestinians are reported to have been killed since the conflict escalated, with widespread destruction of infrastructure and displacement of families. Aid agencies have reported difficulty delivering basic necessities like food, water, and medicine due to continued Israeli restrictions.
Foreign Minister David Lammy also announced that his ministry would summon Israel's ambassador over what Mr. Lammy described as the intolerable offensive in the Gaza Strip. Israel says it has loosened its 11-week blockade of medical, food and fuel supplies into Gaza, but last week announced an expansion of its military operations in the territory. Let's get more on that British announcement from our correspondent, Birgit Mass in London. Welcome, Birgit. It's worth noting that Britain has been a close ally of Israel. So what's London saying?
It has been a close ally and would probably still say it is a close ally. However, a lot of criticism today from the British government. As you said, the Prime Minister Keir Starmer saying that he's horrified by the escalation from Israel, and his Foreign Secretary David Lammy going further, criticizing the Israeli Minister Smotrich, who he says he was talking about Israeli forces planning to cleanse Gaza, and he said that language was extremist and monstrous, and that he condemns it in the strongest terms. Now, this comes after the UN humanitarian chief, Tom Fletcher, had been warning that 14,000 babies are at risk of starving in Gaza if the blockade is not changing. And that was a number that was featuring quite a lot in the debate in the House of Commons today. So strong words, but also actions. As you said, suspension of a new free trade agreement with Israel, and also the Israeli ambassador summoned.
And so what is this? How is this British move likely to affect relations between the two countries?
It is already affecting relations between the two countries. I think it's meaningful that Foreign Secretary David Lammy seemed to be addressing directly Israeli society when he was talking today in the House of Commons. He said the conduct of the war in Gaza is damaging on our relationship with your government, and that Israel's actions are intolerable. So really strong words directed at Israeli citizens. And we have a reaction by the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesman Oren Marmorstein. He said that the British mandate ended 77 years ago, and that external pressure will not divert Israel from its path. So a war of words, but also action. And it's also meaningful that the Foreign Secretary David Lammy has said that UK is also working together with other international partners. There has been a joint statement by the UK, France and Canada, also directed at Israel, and arguing that the escalation is wholly disproportionate.
The UN and other organizations have warned of famine and disease spreading rapidly in the region. While some countries have voiced criticism, the UK's decision to halt trade talks is one of the most direct actions taken by a Western government against Israel in recent months. It follows similar moves by other nations, including Ireland and Spain, who have also condemned the blockade and called for an immediate ceasefire. The UK's stance could also influence other European nations to reassess their diplomatic and economic relationships with Israel. If more countries follow suit, Israel may find itself increasingly isolated on the global stage. This could pressure the Netanyahu government to reconsider its strategy and engage in negotiations for a sustainable ceasefire. At home, the decision has sparked intense debate. Supporters of the move argue it aligns the UK with humanitarian principles and reinforces its credibility as a global advocate for human rights. Critics, however, say the decision risks destabilizing diplomatic relations and weakening the UK's influence in the Middle East peace process. The UK's historically close relationship with Israel makes this move even more significant. Since the 1950s, the two countries have shared strong defense, intelligence, and trade ties. Suspending trade talks doesn't end that relationship, but it introduces a notable cooling of diplomatic warmth, particularly under the current Labour government. Some analysts argue that this is not just about Gaza, but a broader recalibration of the UK's foreign policy posture. Under a new political leadership, the UK is seeking to restore its international standing post-Brexit by projecting a stronger commitment to international law and ethical diplomacy. This shift may signal a more assertive approach in dealing with countries accused of violating human rights, regardless of historical alliances. Meanwhile, in Israel, officials have reacted with disappointment and defiance. A spokesperson for the Israeli Foreign Ministry accused the UK of caving to political pressure and misunderstanding the nature of the conflict. They emphasized Israel's right to defend itself and claimed that the military operations in Gaza are aimed at dismantling Hamas, not harming civilians. However, international opinion is increasingly skeptical of that narrative. Investigations and reports from independent observers have highlighted disproportionate use of force and widespread civilian casualties. This has only intensified calls for accountability and an end to the blockade. The question now is whether this move will lead to tangible changes on the ground. Will Israel adjust its military strategy or open humanitarian corridors? Or will it double down, interpreting this as an unfair attack on its sovereignty? And how will other major powers respond? Will the United States, traditionally Israel's strongest ally, feel pressure to take a similar stance? This moment could be a turning point not just in UK-Israel relations, but in the broader international approach to the conflict in Gaza. The UK's decision may pave the way for a more unified global response, or it could deepen divisions among Western allies. One thing is clear: the cost of inaction in Gaza is growing by the day. As the humanitarian crisis worsens, political leaders around the world will be forced to reckon with their role in either enabling or preventing further suffering. The UK has made its move. Now the world watches to see what comes next.